I never thought I would stand at my wife's funeral alone, waiting for our only daughter to walk through those church doors. But she never came. Instead, someone placed a vase of flowers at the altar with her name on the card. That was all I got from her. Flowers, instead of herself. I'm standing here in this chapel, surrounded by flowers and whispered condolences, but all I can see is that empty chair in the front row. Third seat from the left. The one I saved for Emily. The one that should have held my daughter. The funeral director asked me this morning if I wanted to remove it, said it might be less noticeable, but I couldn't. That chair represents 32 years of hope, 32 years of believing that when it truly mattered, she would be here. Even now, as Reverend Matthews speaks about my wife's kindness and grace, part of me keeps glancing toward the back doors, thinking maybe she'll slip in quietly, the way she used to when she was late for dinner, but she won't come. I know this now. The organist plays Margaret's favorite hymn, and I hear voices rising around me, my brother's deep bass, my sister-in-law's trembling soprano, neighbors and friends who knew my wife for decades. But Emily's voice isn't among them, the voice that used to harmonize with her mother during car rides, the voice that sang Happy Birthday off-key every year, the voice I haven't heard in person for 3 years now. If this story moves you, if you understand what it means to love someone who has chosen to walk away, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one, and please leave a comment. Tell me about your own experiences with family. Sometimes sharing our pain helps us carry it. Mrs. Henderson from next door keeps looking at me with those pitying eyes. She knows. They all know. The question isn't whether Emily received the call about your mother's passing. I made sure of that. I called her myself, my hands shaking as I dialed that number I still know by heart. The question everyone's wondering is why she chose not to come. I close my eyes, and I can still hear Margaret's voice from 2 weeks ago, weak but determined from her hospital bed. "Promise me you'll keep trying with Emily," she whispered, her fingers barely able to squeeze mine. "Promise me you won't give up on her, no matter what happens." I promised. God help me. I promised my dying wife that I would never stop hoping for our daughter's return. But standing here now, watching people crane their necks to see that empty chair, feeling their curiosity and their judgment, I wonder if some promises are too heavy to keep. The flowers are beautiful, white roses and lilies, exactly what Margaret would have wanted. There's even a bouquet from Emily, delivered this morning with a card that simply says, "With love, Emily." Such formal words. Such cold, distant words from someone who used to sign her crayon drawings. "Love you to the moon and back, Daddy." I wanted her hand on my shoulder more than any bouquet. I wanted her tears mixing with mine, her voice breaking as she shared memories of the woman who raised her with such fierce protective love. Instead, I have flowers that will wilt in a week, and questions I'll carry forever. Reverend Matthews is talking about how Margaret never lost faith, how she believed in the power of love to heal any wound. If only she could see this wound now. Her daughter's absence carved into this moment like a scar across everything beautiful we're trying to remember about her life. I think about the last conversation Margaret and I had about Emily. She was so hopeful, even at the end. "When I'm gone," she said, "grief will bring you two together. You'll need each other." She believed it so completely. She died believing her daughter would be here today, holding my hand, helping me carry this unbearable weight. Instead, I'm alone in a room full of people, and the loneliness is crushing. People keep approaching me with their condolences. They shake my hand. They hug me carefully. They tell me how sorry they are for my loss. But I can see the questions in their eyes. Where is Emily? Why isn't she here? What happened between you two? Some are kind enough not to ask. Others aren't so tactful. "I'm sure Emily wanted to be here," my cousin Janet whispers. "I'm sure she had her reasons." What reasons could possibly be good enough? What reason justifies abandoning your father on the day he buries the love of his life? What reason makes flowers an acceptable substitute for presents, for shared grief, for the simple acknowledgement that we were once a family? I know what people are thinking because I'm thinking it too. They're wondering what kind of father I must have been to drive my own child away so completely. They're looking at me and seeing failure, not just the failure of a marriage that couldn't hold, but the failure of a parent who couldn't keep his daughter close enough to come home when it mattered most. The service is ending now. People are filing past Margaret's casket, saying their final goodbyes. I should be up there too, but I can't move. I'm frozen here, staring at that empty chair, trying to understand how we got to this place. Where did it all go wrong? When did my little girl, who used to fall asleep on my chest during Sunday afternoon naps, become a stranger who sends flowers instead of herself? When did love become so fragile that it couldn't survive whatever it is I did or didn't do or failed to understand? As I finally stand to approach my wife's casket, I realize I'm grieving two losses today. I'm saying goodbye to Margaret, yes, but I'm also facing the truth I've been avoiding for years. I've already lost Emily. That empty chair isn't just about today. It's about all the days to come, all the moments when I'll look for her and find. I was usually getting ready for work during those morning conversations, adjusting my tie or looking for my keys, only half listening. I thought there would always be more Sunday mornings. I thought those moments were guaranteed, endless, the way you assume the sun will rise tomorrow. After school, Emily would burst through the front door like a small hurricane, backpack sliding off her shoulder, shoes kicked off wherever they landed. "Dad, Dad, guess what?" she'd call, looking for me first, always first, before she found her mother. Those were the golden years, when I was still her hero, when my opinion mattered more than anyone else's in the world. She'd tell me about her day, who was mean to whom at lunch, what book they were reading in English class, how she scored the winning goal in soccer practice. I'd listen while I loosened my tie, asking questions, making jokes that would send her into fits of giggles. Margaret would watch us from the kitchen doorway, smiling that soft smile that said she was storing up these moments like treasures. Our dinner table was never quiet. Emily was a talker, always had been, and Margaret encouraged it. We'd go around the table, sharing the best and worst parts of our day. It was Margaret's idea, this little ritual, and even when Emily got older and rolled her eyes at it, she still participated, still shared, still let us into her world. I remember one particular evening when Emily was about 13. She'd been quiet during dinner, just pushing her food around her plate. Finally, when it was her turn to share, she said, "The worst part of my day was that Jenny Martinez told everyone I was weird because I liked to read during lunch instead of gossiping about boys." Margaret reached over and squeezed her hand. "And what did you tell Jenny Martinez?" Emily looked up, suddenly fierce. "I told her that weird people change the world, and boring people just talk about it." I was so proud in that moment, so proud of this smart, strong daughter we were raising. I told her so, and she beamed at me across that dinner table like I'd given her the greatest gift in the world. But even then, even in those good years, I can see the cracks now, the warning signs I was too busy, too confident, too assuming to notice. I worked long hours, 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. I told myself I was providing for my family, building a future for Emily's college fund, ensuring we could give her everything she needed. But while I was building that future, I was missing the present. Margaret never complained, not directly, but I can see now how often she had to explain my absence to Emily. "Daddy's working late again, sweetheart. He'll read you a story tomorrow night. Daddy can't make it to your soccer game, but I'll be there cheering twice as loud. Daddy wanted to come to the father-daughter dance, honey, but this work trip came up suddenly." Margaret became the bridge between Emily and me. She'd tell me what was happening in Emily's life, relay important conversations, make sure I knew about school events and friend drama and teenage heartbreaks. I was getting Emily's life secondhand, filtered through Margaret's loving but limited perspective. When Emily was in high school, she started turning to Margaret for everything. Boy troubles, friend fights, college applications, decisions about her future. It all went through Mom first. I told myself that was normal, that teenage girls naturally gravitate toward their mothers. I didn't see how I was becoming peripheral, how I was slowly being edited out of the important moments. There was one evening, Emily must have been 16, when she came home upset about something that had happened at school. I was home early for once, sitting in my chair reading the paper, when she walked in with tears on her cheeks. For just a moment, she looked at me like she might tell me what was wrong. Our eyes met across the living room, and I saw her considering it. But then Margaret appeared from the kitchen, took one look at Emily's face, and opened her arms. Emily fell into them, and they disappeared upstairs together. I heard their voices through the ceiling, Muffled conversations, occasional laughter, the sound of healing happening without me. I went back to my newspaper, telling myself it was better this way. Margaret was better at this emotional stuff anyway. She knew what to say, how to comfort, how to fix things. I was good at other things, fixing the car, managing finances, planning vacations. We had our roles. But I wonder now if that was the beginning of the end. If that moment when Emily chose her mother's comfort over mine was the first step toward choosing nothing from me at all. Christmas mornings were magic when Emily was young. She'd wake up at dawn, creep downstairs to peek at the presents, then come running back upstairs to wake us up. "Santa came! Santa came!" she'd yell, bouncing on our bed until we grudgingly got up to see what he'd brought. Margaret and I would sit on the couch drinking coffee and watching Emily tear through wrapping paper with pure joy. She'd squeal over every gift, thank us profusely, then immediately want to play with everything at once. Those mornings felt perfect, complete, like we were the family from a Christmas card. Even as she got older, Emily maintained some of that Christmas magic. She'd sleep in a little later, but she'd still get excited about opening presents, still want to make a big breakfast together, still insist we watch old Christmas movies while eating cookies for lunch. The last Christmas we were all together, really together. Emily was 19, home from her sophomore year of college. She seemed different that year, more grown up, but also more distant. She spent a lot of time on her phone, texting friends, making plans to see people from high school. When we asked about her classes or her life at school, her answers were polite but brief. Margaret noticed it too. I caught her watching Emily sometimes with a worried expression, like she was trying to solve a puzzle she couldn't quite figure out. But on Christmas morning, some of the old Emily came back. She got excited about the sweater Margaret had knitted for her, laughed at the silly socks I'd put in her stocking, took pictures of all of us by the tree. For those few hours, it felt like nothing had changed, like we were still the family we'd always been. I didn't know it was the last time. If I had known, I would have paid more attention. I would have memorized the sound of her laugh, the way she curled up in the corner of the couch with her hot chocolate, the way she absently played with Margaret's hair while we watched movies. But we never know when the last time is the last time, do we? We assume there will always be another Christmas, another chance, another moment to get it right. Now I walk through this house and I see ghosts of all those family moments. The kitchen island where Emily used to eat breakfast, the piano bench where she practiced for hours, the corner of the couch that was always her spot during family movie nights. Did I lose my daughter years ago, and I just didn't see it until that empty seat proved it? Was the distance growing even during those Sunday morning breakfasts and Christmas morning celebrations? Was I already becoming a stranger to her while I thought we were still a family? I keep coming back to that question, turning it over in my mind like a stone I can't put down. When did I stop being someone she needed? When did I become someone she could live without? The change didn't happen overnight. It was so gradual, so subtle, that I didn't even notice it at first. Like watching grass grow or hair turn gray. You don't see it happening until one day you look up and everything is different. It started during Emily's junior year of college. The phone calls that used to come every Sunday began to skip weeks. When I'd mention it to Margaret, she'd make excuses. "She's busy with midterms, honey." Or, "You know how it is at that age. They're focused on their friends and their future." But I could hear something different in Emily's voice during those increasingly rare conversations. A politeness that hadn't been there before. Like she was talking to a neighbor or a distant relative, not her father. She'd ask about my work, my health, the weather, but her questions felt rehearsed, automatic. When I'd try to dig deeper, ask about her classes or her relationships, her answers became shorter. "School's fine, Dad. Yeah, I'm dating someone, but it's nothing serious. My roommate's nice." Everything was fine, or good, or okay. Words that told me absolutely nothing about who my daughter was becoming. I remember the first time she forgot my birthday. Emily had never forgotten my birthday, not once in 22 years. She'd been making me homemade cards since she could hold a crayon, calling to sing off-key versions of Happy Birthday, even when she was away at college. But that year, nothing. The day came and went. Margaret had made my favorite dinner, given me a beautiful watch, but there was this shadow over everything because Emily hadn't called. Margaret kept checking her phone, making excuses. I'm sure she'll call tonight, she said. She's probably just busy. But she didn't call that night, or the next day. When she finally called 3 days later, she was mortified. Oh my God, Dad, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I forgot. I've been so swamped with this huge project, and I told her it was fine, that it didn't matter, but we both knew it did. You don't forget your father's birthday unless that father has become peripheral to your life, unless he's become someone you can afford to forget. The holidays became exercises in polite distance. Emily would come home for Christmas, but she'd spend most of her time reconnecting with high school friends, making plans that didn't include us. She'd be physically present at our dinner table, but mentally she was somewhere else, with someone else. I started to notice how much she communicated with Margaret versus how little she communicated with me. They'd text throughout the day, little conversations about nothing and everything. Margaret would show me some of the messages, trying to keep me connected to Emily's life secondhand. Look, she sent me a picture of her new haircut. She's thinking about changing her major to communications. She really likes this boy she's been seeing. But Emily wasn't sending those pictures to me, wasn't sharing those thoughts with me. I was getting the highlights reel from Margaret, like a grandfather might get updates about a grandchild he rarely sees. I tried to bridge the gap. I really did. I started texting her myself. Not often, because I didn't want to seem desperate, but regularly enough to show I was thinking about her. Most of the time she'd respond with a thumbs up emoji or a brief, thanks Dad. Sometimes she wouldn't respond at all. I suggested visits. Why don't I drive up and take you to dinner? I'd ask during our occasional phone calls. I could see your campus, meet some of your friends. There was always a reason why it wouldn't work. She had finals. She had a big project due. She was going out of town with friends. She was super busy. That phrase became her standard response to any invitation, any suggestion that we spend time together. Margaret kept encouraging me to be patient. She's finding herself, she'd say. This is normal. She'll come back around. But I could see the worry in Margaret's eyes, even as she defended Emily's behavior. She was losing her daughter too, just more slowly, less obviously. The worst part was that I started reacting with pride instead of pursuing with love. When Emily would give me those short, distant responses, I'd pull back too. If she didn't want to talk, fine. If she was too busy for her father, I could be too busy for her games. I know now how stupid that was, how counterproductive, but my feelings were hurt, and I'm human. When someone consistently shows you that you're not a priority, it's natural to start protecting yourself from that rejection. So instead of calling more, I called less. Instead of pushing for visits, I stopped suggesting them. Instead of fighting for my place in her life, I stepped back and waited for her to come to me. She never did. Margaret tried to play mediator, but it was an impossible position. She'd tell Emily I missed her, tell me Emily was just going through a phase. She'd try to orchestrate phone calls and plan family activities that would bring us together. But you can't force connection. You can't make someone love you, even when that someone is your own child. I remember one particularly painful conversation during Emily's senior year of college. I had called to ask about her graduation plans, whether she wanted us to book a hotel room, take her out to celebrate. You don't need to come, she said quietly. I mean, you can if you want to, but it's not a big deal. Lots of parents don't come to graduation. The casualness of it, the way she dismissed something that should have been a major milestone, felt like a slap. This was my daughter's college graduation. Of course I wanted to be there. Of course it was a big deal. We'll be there, I said firmly. Your mother would never forgive me if we missed your graduation. Okay, she said. Whatever. Whatever. My daughter's graduation was whatever to her. Or maybe my presence at her graduation was whatever to her. Either way, it cut deep. We went, of course. Sat in those uncomfortable auditorium seats for 2 hours, waiting to hear her name called. When she walked across that stage, Margaret cried happy tears, and I felt empty. Proud, yes, but also profoundly sad. This should have been a moment of shared joy, of family celebration. Instead, it felt like we were strangers watching someone we used to know achieve something that had nothing to do with us. Afterward, Emily was polite, grateful for the gifts we'd brought, willing to take pictures and go to dinner. but it all felt like an obligation she was fulfilling rather than a celebration she wanted to share. That was when I knew, really knew, that I had lost her. Not to death or tragedy or some dramatic falling out, but to indifference. She had simply outgrown her need for me, the way children outgrow clothes or toys or bedtime stories. The question that haunted me then, and haunts me still, is whether I let it happen or caused it to happen. Did I fail to fight hard enough for our relationship? Did I make mistakes that pushed her away? Or was this always inevitable? The natural progression of a child becoming independent, becoming someone who doesn't need her father anymore? I don't know. I may never know. But I do know that by the time Emily graduated college, the distance between us had become a chasm. She was living her life, building her future, making her choices, and I was just someone she used to know well, someone she now spoke to occasionally out of duty rather than desire. The slow erosion of our bond became impossible to ignore, but I never imagined it would lead to complete abandonment. I thought there was still love there, buried under all that distance and politeness. I thought that when real crisis came, when it truly mattered, she would remember that she was my daughter and I was her father. I was wrong. Margaret's diagnosis came on a Tuesday in March: pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctor delivered the news with the kind of professional compassion they teach in medical school. Serious, but not hopeless. Realistic, but not cruel. He talked about treatment options and quality of life and making the most of the time we have left. I heard the words, but I couldn't process them. This was my Margaret, who did yoga every morning and had never smoked a day in her life. This was the woman who made everything okay, who held our family together with her quiet strength and endless patience. How could her body be betraying her like this? Margaret took the news better than I did. She asked practical questions about treatment, about side effects, about timelines. She was already planning, already figuring out how to manage this crisis with the same grace she'd managed everything else in our 40-year marriage. But that night, when we got home from the doctor's appointment, she finally broke down. I held her on our bed while she sobbed against my chest, and all I could think was, Emily needs to know. Emily needs to come home. I called her that evening. She was living in Chicago by then, working at some marketing firm, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates. When I told her about the diagnosis, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. How bad is it? She finally asked. Bad, I said. Very bad. The doctor thinks. He thinks we're looking at months, not years. Another silence. Then, I'm so sorry, Dad. Is there anything I can do? Anything she could do. Come home, I wanted to say. Come home and spend time with your mother while we still have her. Come home and help me figure out how to face this. Come home and be our daughter again. But I didn't say any of that. I told her we'd keep her updated, that we'd let her know if anything changed. She said she'd try to visit soon when she could get some time off work. She didn't visit. Not during those first few weeks when Margaret was still feeling relatively good. Not during the chemotherapy treatments that left my wife exhausted and nauseated. Not during the long nights when Margaret would wake up crying from pain or fear, or the simple, overwhelming sadness of knowing she was dying. Margaret never stopped asking about Emily. Every day, sometimes multiple times a day, she'd wonder aloud when Emily might come, whether we should call her, whether she was okay. I don't want her to see me like this, Margaret would say when the chemo made her too weak to get out of bed. But I miss her so much, I just want to hold her one more time. I'd reassure her that Emily would come, that she was just busy with work, that she was processing the news in her own way. But privately I was furious and heartbroken and completely bewildered by my daughter's absence. The treatments didn't work. We knew they probably wouldn't. The cancer was too advanced, had spread too far, but we had to try. Margaret was a fighter, always had been. She endured every round of chemo with determination, clinging to whatever small hope the doctors could offer. I took leave from work to be with her. For the first time in my career, my job became secondary to something else. I wish I'd learned that lesson earlier, when Emily was young and needed me to prioritize her over quarterly reports and client meetings. But you learn what matters when you're facing the possibility of losing it forever. Margaret and I spent those weeks talking in ways we hadn't talked in years, about our marriage, our regrets, our memories, about Emily, always Emily. Margaret worried constantly about the rift between Emily and me, blamed herself for not doing more to bridge it. I should have pushed harder, she'd say. I should have made her understand how much you love her. You did everything you could, I'd tell her. You were perfect. You are perfect. But Margaret didn't feel perfect. She felt like she was failing us both, failing me by dying, failing Emily by leaving her without a mother's guidance. As Margaret got sicker, my calls to Emily became more frequent and more desperate. I'd call with updates about treatments, about doctor's appointments, about how her mother was feeling that day. Emily would listen politely, ask appropriate questions, express concern in all the right places. But she still didn't come. She's scared, Margaret would say, making excuses for our daughter the way she'd been making excuses for years. Hospitals frighten her. Death frightens her. She doesn't know how to handle this. Maybe that was true. Maybe Emily was paralyzed by fear or grief or some combination of emotions I couldn't understand. But all I knew was that Margaret was dying, and our daughter wasn't here. 3 weeks before Margaret died, she had a good day. The pain was manageable, her appetite was better, she had enough energy to sit up in bed and have real conversations. I thought maybe we were getting a reprieve, a few more weeks or months to spend together. That's when she brought up Emily again, but this time with more urgency. I need you to promise me something, Margaret said, taking my hand with fingers that felt like paper. Promise me you'll never give up on Emily. Promise me you'll keep loving her, even if she can't love you back right now. Margaret, promise me, she insisted. I know you're angry with her. I know you feel abandoned. But she's our daughter, and something is broken inside her that makes her pull away from the people who love her most. Don't let that brokenness win. Don't let it destroy what's left of our family. I promised, though the promise felt like swallowing glass. How do you keep loving someone who has shown you, repeatedly and consistently, that your love doesn't matter to them? 2 weeks later, Margaret took a turn for the worse. The doctors moved her to hospice care, said it was a matter of days now, not weeks. I called Emily immediately. You need to come now, I said, not caring any more about being polite or patient. If you want to see your mother alive, if you want to say goodbye, you need to come now. I know, Emily said, and her voice was thick with tears. I know, Dad. I'm trying to arrange things at work, trying to get a flight. Forget work, I said. Forget everything else. Your mother is dying, Emily. She's been asking for you every day for months, and now we're running out of days. I'll be there, she promised. I'll be there tomorrow. But she wasn't there tomorrow, or the day after that. When I called to ask where she was, she said her flight had been canceled, that she was trying to get another one, that she'd be there as soon as she could. Margaret died on a Thursday morning while I held her hand. She'd been unconscious for 2 days, breathing shallow and labored, her body finally surrendering to the cancer that had invaded every part of her. In those last moments, she squeezed my hand with whatever strength she had left. I like to think she was telling me she loved me, or that everything would be okay, or that she was proud of the life we'd built together. But I think she was also telling me goodbye on Emily's behalf, saying the goodbye our daughter couldn't be there to say herself. Emily called that evening, 3 hours after her mother had died. She was at the airport, she said, finally on her way. Too late, but finally coming. I'm so sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry, Dad. I tried to get there. I wanted to be there. Maybe she did too. Maybe there really were canceled flights and work obligations and legitimate reasons for the delay, but it didn't matter anymore. Margaret was gone, and Emily had missed her chance to say goodbye, to hold her mother's hand one last time, to receive whatever final words of love and wisdom Margaret had been saving for her. I felt many things in that moment: grief, anger, disappointment, exhaustion, but mostly I felt alone, profoundly, devastatingly alone. I had lost my wife, the center of my world for 40 years, and my daughter, the person who should have been there to share that loss, was a stranger on the other end of a phone line, crying tears that came too late to matter. That night, I sat in the hospital room with Margaret's body until the nurses gently suggested it was time to go. I kissed her forehead, told her I loved her, promised her one more time that I wouldn't give up on Emily. But as I drove home to our empty house, I wondered if some promises are impossible to keep. How do you hold on to someone who has already let go of you? How do you love someone who has chosen distance over closeness, absence over presence, flowers over showing up? I didn't know then. I still don't know now. The flowers arrived at the funeral home that morning, 2 hours before the service was scheduled to begin. White roses and baby's breath, arranged in a tasteful spray with a small white card tucked between the stems. I was adjusting my tie in the mirror when the funeral director approached me with the arrangement in his hands. "These just came for Mrs. Peterson," he said gently, "from your daughter." My hands were shaking as I took the card. Such a small thing, maybe 3 inches by 2 inches, with Emily's familiar handwriting in blue ink. "With love, Emily." Below that, in smaller letters, "I'm sorry I can't be there." I'm sorry I can't be there. 5 words that felt like a punch to the gut. Can't be there. As if there were some external force preventing her from coming, some insurmountable obstacle rather than a choice she was making. I held that card for a long time, studying the handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards and school papers and grocery lists stuck to our refrigerator. This same hand had once drawn me stick figure pictures labeled "My Daddy." This same hand had written thank you notes for Christmas presents and signed report cards for me to be proud of. Now it had written an apology for not coming to her own mother's funeral. The funeral director was still standing there, waiting for some kind of response. I cleared my throat and managed to say, "They're beautiful, thank you." But they weren't beautiful to me. They were cold, formal, the kind of arrangement you send to a business acquaintance or distant relative. They said obligation fulfilled rather than love shared. They said, "I've done my duty," rather than "I'm sharing your grief." I carried the card with me into the chapel, slipped it into my jacket pocket next to my heart. Throughout the service, I could feel it there, that small piece of paper that represented everything broken between my daughter and me. People kept glancing at the flowers during the service. I saw them reading the card that was displayed with the arrangement, saw the look of confusion on their faces when they realized Emily wasn't there. Some of them looked at me with questions in their eyes. Others looked away quickly, embarrassed by the obvious family drama playing out in full view. My brother Paul leaned over during the opening hymn and whispered, "Where's Emily?" I couldn't answer him. What was I supposed to say? That she'd sent flowers instead of herself? That she was sorry she couldn't be there, as if this were a dinner party she was missing rather than her mother's funeral? I kept staring at those flowers throughout the service, trying to understand what they meant. Was this Emily's way of showing love from a distance? Was she genuinely unable to come? Or was this her way of participating without having to actually participate? During the eulogy, Reverend Matthews talked about Margaret's devotion to family, her fierce love for her daughter, her belief that love could overcome any obstacle. He mentioned how Margaret had prayed every day for Emily, how she'd never stopped believing that their family would heal from whatever had hurt it. If Margaret could have seen those flowers, seen Emily's absence explained away with 5 polite words on a small white card, what would she have thought? Would she have made excuses the way she always did? Would she have found some way to interpret this as love rather than abandonment? Or would she finally have seen what I was seeing, that our daughter had moved so far away from us emotionally that even death couldn't bring her back? After the service, people filed past me with their condolences. They shook my hand, hugged me, told me how sorry they were for my loss, but I could hear the whispered conversations happening around me. "I can't believe Emily isn't here." "What do you think happened between them?" "Those flowers are lovely, but really, if it were my mother's funeral, nothing could keep me away." Each whispered comment felt like salt in an open wound, not just because of what people were saying, but because they were right. Emily should have been here. Nothing should have been able to keep her away from this moment, this final goodbye to the woman who had loved her unconditionally for 32 years. My sister-in-law approached me near the end of the receiving line. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "The flowers are beautiful, Robert. I'm sure Emily wanted to be here." "Are you?" I asked, and my voice came out harder than I intended. "Are you sure about that?" She stepped back, surprised by my tone. "I just meant—" "I know what you meant," I said. "Everyone keeps telling me she wanted to be here, that she had her reasons, that I should understand. But you know what? I don't understand. I don't understand how you can want to be somewhere and choose not to be there. I don't understand how flowers become an acceptable substitute for presents." People were staring now. I could feel their eyes on me, could sense the discomfort I was creating with my honesty, but I was past caring about social niceties. She chose not to come, I said, loudly enough for several people to hear. My daughter chose to send flowers instead of herself to her mother's funeral. Let's stop pretending there's some noble reason for that choice. The silence that followed was deafening. People looked at their shoes, at the flowers, at anything except me. My outburst had confirmed what they'd all been thinking, but were too polite to say out loud. Later, at the graveside service, I held that card again while they lowered Margaret's casket into the ground. With love, Emily. Such formal words. Such distant, cold words from someone who used to sign her name with hearts and smiley faces. I thought about all the cards Emily had given me over the years. Homemade Father's Day cards with construction paper and glitter. Birthday cards with personal messages inside. Thank you cards for Christmas presents or special trips. This card felt different. It felt like something you'd send to someone you barely knew, someone you felt obligated to acknowledge but didn't actually care about. There was no personal message, no memory of her mother, no acknowledgement of what we were all going through, just 5 words of apology for an absence that didn't need to happen. As they started shoveling dirt onto the casket, I made a decision. I pulled Emily's card out of my pocket, looked at it one more time, and then let it flutter down into the grave with Margaret. If Emily couldn't be here to say goodbye to her mother in person, at least her written words could go into the ground with the woman who had never stopped loving her. People saw me do it. I heard someone gasp, saw my brother reach out as if to stop me, but I didn't care. That card belonged with Margaret, not with me. It was Emily's goodbye, inadequate as it was, and it belonged in that grave with the mother who had died still hoping for her daughter's return. The flowers went home with me afterward. I didn't know what else to do with them. They sat on my kitchen table for a week, slowly wilting, slowly dying, a constant reminder of Emily's absence. Every time I looked at them, I felt that same punch to the gut I'd felt when I first read her card. Finally, I threw them away. I couldn't stand looking at them anymore. Couldn't stand the way they made me feel like a fool for hoping she might actually show up. They were beautiful flowers, but they weren't what I needed. They weren't what Margaret had needed in her final days. What we had needed was Emily herself, her voice singing hymns with us, her tears mixing with ours, her hand in mine as we said goodbye to the woman who had given us both life and love and everything good about being a family. Instead, we got flowers and 5 words of apology. A transaction rather than a relationship, a gesture rather than genuine grief. I know people thought I was too hard on Emily, too unforgiving of her absence. But they didn't understand what it felt like to bury your wife alone, to stand at that graveside without the one person who should have been there beside you, sharing that unbearable weight. Those flowers, beautiful as they were, couldn't hold my hand. They couldn't share memories of Margaret. They couldn't help me carry the crushing loneliness of being the only one left who remembered what our family used to be. They were just flowers, and flowers, no matter how beautiful, are no substitute for the people we love. The house felt different when I walked into it after the funeral. Not just empty. It had been empty since Margaret died, but now it felt hollow, echoing with all the conversations that should have happened but didn't. All the comfort that should have been shared but wasn't. I sat in my chair in the living room, still wearing my funeral suit, and tried to process what had just happened. I had buried my wife of 40 years, and my daughter had sent flowers. The woman who had given Emily life, who had worried about her every single day until she died, who had begged me with her last breaths not to give up on our daughter. That woman had been lowered into the ground without Emily there to say goodbye. The silence was suffocating. No Margaret humming in the kitchen. No Emily's voice on the phone, checking in, asking how I was holding up. Just silence and the sound of my own breathing and the tick of the grandfather clock Margaret had bought for our 20th anniversary. I kept expecting the phone to ring. Surely Emily would call now. Surely she would realize what she had missed, what she had done to me, what she had done to her mother's memory. Surely there would be some explanation, some apology, some acknowledgement that sending flowers to your mother's funeral is not the same thing as being there. But the phone didn't ring that evening, or the next day, or the day after that. 3 days after the funeral, I finally couldn't stand the silence anymore. I called her. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, Dad." Her voice was quiet, subdued, but not surprised to hear from me. Emily, I said, and then I didn't know what to say next. Where do you start a conversation like this? How do you tell your daughter that her absence at her mother's funeral was the deepest betrayal you've ever experienced? I'm so sorry about Mom, she said quickly, filling the silence. I know how much you loved her. I know how hard this must be. You know how hard this must be, I repeated slowly. Do you, Emily? Do you really know? There was a pause. What do you mean? I mean, do you know what it's like to bury your wife of 40 years alone? Do you know what it's like to stand at that graveside without your only child beside you? Do you know what it's like to have people ask where your daughter is and not know what to tell them? Another pause, longer this time. Dad, I wanted to be there. You have to believe that. But with work and the flights and everything... Stop, I said. Just stop. Don't give me excuses about work and flights. People fly across the country every day. People take time off work every day. People make it to funerals that matter to them every day. It did matter to me, she said, and I could hear tears in her voice now. Mom mattered to me. Then where were you? The question came out as a whisper, but it felt like a shout. Where were you, Emily? Your mother asked for you every single day for months. Every day she wondered when you were coming, whether you were okay, whether you still loved her, and you didn't come. Not once during her illness, not once during her final weeks, and not to her funeral. She was crying now, I could hear it. I know, she said. I know I should have been there. I know I let you down. I let her down. Yes, I said. You did. You let us both down in the worst possible way. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Dad. Are you? I asked. Are you really sorry? Or are you just sorry that I'm upset about it? What kind of question is that? The kind of question a father asks when his daughter sends flowers instead of herself to her mother's funeral. The kind of question a father asks when he realizes his child has become a stranger who expresses love through florists rather than presents. The silence stretched between us again. I could hear her breathing, could imagine her sitting in her apartment in Chicago, surrounded by the life she'd built that had no room in it for us. The flowers were beautiful, I said finally. Everyone commented on how beautiful they were. White roses and baby's breath. Very tasteful, very appropriate. Your card was nice too. With love, Emily. I'm sorry I can't be there. Very polite. Dad. But you know what, Emily? Your mother didn't need beautiful flowers. She needed her daughter. I didn't need a polite card. I needed my child beside me. We needed you, and you sent a floral arrangement instead. She was sobbing now, those deep, wrenching sobs that come from somewhere deeper than tears. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was okay, to make excuses for her the way Margaret always had. But a larger part of me was too raw, too devastated to offer comfort to someone who had caused so much pain. I know you're upset, she said when she could speak again. I know you're angry with me, but I was dealing with my own grief, my own... Your own what? I interrupted. Your own what, Emily? Your own busy schedule? Your own inability to face difficult situations? Your own selfishness? That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me, what was so important that it kept you from your mother's funeral? What was so urgent that it was worth disappointing the woman who loved you more than her own life? She couldn't answer, or wouldn't answer. The silence told me everything I needed to know. Your mother spent her last conscious moments asking about you, I said. She died holding my hand, but she was thinking about you. She made me promise, that I would never give up on you, that I would keep loving you no matter what. Do you know how it felt to make that promise while you were hundreds of miles away, too busy to say goodbye to the woman who gave you everything? I loved her, Emily said, her voice barely audible. Did you? I asked. Because love isn't just a feeling, Emily. Love is action. Love is showing Geets. Love is being there when it matters most, and you weren't there. I know, she whispered. I know I wasn't there. I know I failed her. I know I failed you. Yes, I said, you did. We sat in silence after that, connected by a phone line, but separated by something much deeper than distance. I could hear her crying, and part of me wanted to take back the harsh words, to comfort her, to make this easier for both of us. But I couldn't. The truth was too heavy, too important to soften with false comfort. What happens now? She asked eventually. I don't know, I said. and it was the most honest answer I could give. I honestly don't know, Emily. Your mother made me promise not to give up on you, but I don't know how to love someone who has shown me so clearly that my love doesn't matter to them. It does matter, she said quickly. Your love does matter to me. Does it? Because your actions suggest otherwise. Your absence suggests otherwise. Your choices suggest otherwise. I made a mistake, she said. I made a terrible mistake, and I know that now, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean your love doesn't matter. Maybe, I said. Maybe it was just a mistake, but it was a mistake that cost us everything, Emily. You can't unmiss your mother's funeral. You can't undo the choice to send flowers instead of yourself. Some mistakes are too big to fix with apologies. She was quiet for a long time after that. Finally, she said, "So what are you saying? That you're giving up on me?" I thought about Margaret's dying wish, her desperate plea for me to keep loving Emily no matter what. I thought about the promises I'd made to a woman who died still believing her daughter would come home. "I don't know," I said again. "I promised your mother I wouldn't give up on you. But I don't know how to keep loving someone who has chosen to be absent from my life. I don't know how to have a relationship with someone who treats my most painful moments as inconveniences to be handled with flowers and cards." "I want to do better," she said. "I want to fix this." "Do you?" I asked. "Or do you just want to feel better about the choice you made?" She didn't answer that question, maybe because she didn't know the answer, maybe because she did know, and the answer was too uncomfortable to speak out loud. We ended that conversation without resolution, without healing, without any clear path forward. She said she loved me. I said I didn't know what that meant anymore. She said she wanted to make things right. I said some things couldn't be made right. And then we hung up, and I was alone again in this too quiet house, surrounded by memories of a woman who had died still believing in a daughter who couldn't be bothered to show up. The silence that followed was different from the silence before the call. Before, it had been expectant, hopeful. After, it was just empty. The silence of someone who had finally stopped waiting for a phone that wasn't going to ring. I spent the weeks after that phone call doing something I hadn't done in years, really thinking about my role in this breakdown, not making excuses, not blaming Emily entirely, but honestly examining the choices I'd made that led us to this place of such profound disconnection. Sitting in Margaret's chair, I'd started sitting there instead of my own, somehow finding comfort in being where she used to be. I forced myself to look at the hard truths I'd been avoiding for years. I had been an absent father during Emily's childhood, not absent in the obvious ways. I lived at home, I provided financially, I showed up for the big events when I could. But I was absent in the small, daily ways that actually build relationships. I was absent for bedtime stories and homework help, and random conversations about nothing important that somehow meant everything. I worked too much. I told myself it was for the family, that I was building security for Emily, as future, ensuring she could go to college and have opportunities I never had. But the truth was, work was easier than parenting. Closing deals was more straightforward than navigating the complex emotional needs of a growing child. I could succeed at work by following clear rules and meeting measurable goals. Being a father required skills I wasn't sure I possessed. Margaret tried to bridge that gap, tried to keep me connected to Emily's daily life. She'd give me reports about school, about friends, about the little dramas and triumphs that filled Emily's world. But getting information secondhand isn't the same as living it firsthand. I was like a foreign correspondent getting briefings about a country I never actually visited. I remember Emily coming to me for help with a science project when she was in 4th grade. Something about the solar system, with poster board and glue and little foam balls painted to look like planets. I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly reports, stressed about a presentation I had to give the next day. "Can you help me later, honey?" I said without looking up from my papers. "Daddy's really busy right now." "But it's due tomorrow," she said, her voice small and disappointed. "Ask your mother," I said. "She's better at that creative stuff anyway." I finished my quarterly reports. I gave a successful presentation the next day, and Emily learned that her father's work was more important than her 4th grade solar system project. Small moment, seemingly insignificant, but those small moments add up to create the shape of a relationship. How many times did I choose work over Emily? How many times did I tell her to ask her mother, to wait until later, to find someone else to help her with whatever she needed? How many times did I send the message that she was an interruption rather than a priority? I used to comfort myself with the thought that quality time mattered more than quantity time, that the moments I did spend with Emily were meaningful, even if they were rare. But sitting in the fete at Quiet House after Margaret's funeral, I had to face the truth. There hadn't been much quality time either. When Emily was in high school and started pulling away, I told myself it was normal teenage behavior. When she went to college and called less often, I told myself she was becoming independent. When she started making excuses to avoid visits, I told myself she was busy building her own life. But maybe she wasn't just growing up and growing away. Maybe she was responding to years of subtle messages that she wasn't my priority. Maybe she was protecting herself from the disappointment of reaching out to a father who was always too busy, too distracted, too focused on other things to give her the attention she needed. I think about the day she called me crying about some boy who had broken her heart during her sophomore year of college. I was in the middle of a budget meeting, surrounded by colleagues, focused on spreadsheets and projections. "Emily, honey, can I call you back?" I said, stepping out of the conference room. "I'm in an important meeting right now." "It's okay," she said quickly. "It's not that important." But it was important. Her broken heart was important. Her need for her father's comfort was important. The opportunity to be there for her in a moment of pain was important. And I missed it because I prioritized a budget meeting over my daughter's tears. She never called me crying about boys again, or crying about anything for that matter. She learned that her father wasn't available for emotional emergencies, that her pain would have to wait for a more convenient time. By the time I realized what was happening, really realized it, not just noticed it in passing, the distance between us had become a canyon. My attempts to reach across it felt clumsy, desperate, too little too late. Emily had learned to live without my input, my comfort, my presence. She had adapted to having a father who was peripheral to her life. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. Even acknowledging all of this, even accepting full responsibility for my failures as a father, I still can't understand how Emily could miss her mother's funeral. Margaret wasn't the absent parent. Margaret was there for everything, every scraped knee, every school play, every heartbreak, every triumph. Margaret loved Emily with a fierce, protective, unwavering devotion that should have earned her daughter's presence at her funeral, regardless of whatever resentment Emily might have felt toward me. Maybe that's what hurts the most. I can accept that Emily pulled away from me because I let her down repeatedly over the years. I can understand that she might not feel close enough to me to comfort me in my grief. But Margaret? Margaret deserved better. Margaret deserved her daughter's goodbye. And yet, as I sit here in the silence of this house that used to be filled with Margaret's laughter and Emily's voice, I have to consider another possibility. Maybe Emily's absence wasn't just about rejecting me. Maybe it was about rejecting the whole family system that had disappointed her, the whole dynamic that had left her feeling peripheral to our marriage, secondary to my career, less important than whatever else demanded our attention. Margaret and I had a strong marriage, a happy marriage, but maybe we were so focused on each other that we didn't notice our daughter feeling left out. Maybe Emily saw us as a unit she couldn't penetrate, a closed circle that included her but didn't center her. I don't know. I may never know. These are the questions that haunt me in the quiet hours, the possibilities that keep me awake at night. What I do know is this. Emily made a choice. Whatever her reasons, whatever her pain, whatever her history of disappointment with me, she chose not to come to her mother's funeral. She chose to send flowers, instead of herself. She chose to let me bury Margaret alone. That choice doesn't erase my failures as a father, but it doesn't excuse them either. Two wrongs don't make a right, but they also don't cancel each other out. We're both responsible for the breakdown of our relationship, but we're responsible in different ways. My failures were failures of attention, of priority, of presence, sins of omission rather than commission. I didn't hurt Emily deliberately. I hurt her by not being there, by not paying attention, by not making her feel important enough to put down my work and focus on her needs. Her failure was a failure of compassion, of loyalty, of basic human decency. She hurt me deliberately by choosing absence over presence at the most difficult moment of my life. She hurt Margaret's memory by refusing to honor the woman who had loved her unconditionally. Both kinds of failure matter. Both have consequences, but they're not equivalent. I can spend the rest of my life regretting the times I chose work over Emily, the conversations I cut short, the moments I missed. I can acknowledge every way I failed to be the father she needed and deserved, but I cannot, I will not, pretend that my failures justify her choice to abandon me when I needed her most. I cannot excuse her absence from her mother's funeral because I was absent from her childhood in smaller, less obvious ways. This reckoning isn't about keeping score or assigning percentages of blame. It's about accepting the complex truth of what we did to each other and what we failed to do for each other over the course of 32 years. Emily and I are both imperfect people who made choices that hurt the people we should have loved better. The difference is, I would give anything to go back and make different choices. I would work less, pay attention more, prioritize her over everything else that seemed so important at the time. I don't think Emily would make a different choice about the funeral. I think if she had to do it over again, she would still send flowers instead of herself. And that difference, that's what makes this betrayal so complete, so final, so impossible to forgive. It's been 6 months since Margaret's funeral now, 6 months since that empty chair in the front row, 6 months since flowers arrived instead of my daughter. The acute grief has settled into something more familiar, more manageable, a dull ache that I carry with me everywhere, like arthritis in my soul. I've learned to live with the silence. The house doesn't echo quite as much anymore, or maybe I've just gotten used to the sound of my own footsteps, my own breathing, my own voice talking to photographs and memories. I talk to Margaret sometimes, out loud, telling her about my day, or asking her opinion about decisions I need to make. It makes me feel less alone, less like the last person left who remembers what our family used to be. Emily hasn't called since that conversation 3 days after the funeral. I haven't called her either. We've reached some kind of standoff, each waiting for the other to make the first move toward, what? Reconciliation? Forgiveness? I'm not even sure what that would look like anymore. Sometimes I draft emails to her in my head, long, carefully worded letters explaining how I feel, what her absence cost me, what I wish I could have done differently over the years. But I never write them down, never send them. What would be the point? She's made her choice about the kind of relationship she wants with me, and that choice is no relationship at all. I've started going to a grief support group at the church. 12 people sitting in a circle in the church basement every Thursday evening, sharing stories about the people we've lost. Most of them are dealing with the death of a spouse, like me. But some have lost children, really lost them, to accidents or illness or violence. When I hear their stories, I feel guilty for grieving Emily as if she were dead when she's simply absent by choice. But there's something to be said for grief that has an endpoint, grief that makes sense, grief that the world understands and accepts. When your wife dies, people bring casseroles and send sympathy cards and check on you for months afterward. When your living daughter chooses to disappear from your life, people don't know what to say. They make awkward comments about complicated family relationships and change the subject as quickly as possible. Margaret's sister calls me every few weeks to check in. She asks about Emily sometimes, in that careful way people do when they're not sure if a topic is safe to discuss. "Have you heard from Emily lately?" she'll ask. "No," I'll say. "Not lately." And then we'll move on to safer topics. My health, the weather, memories of Margaret. But I can hear the questions she's not asking. Why doesn't Emily call? What really happened between you two? Don't you miss her? Of course I miss her. I miss her every single day. I miss the daughter she used to be, back when she would run to me after school with stories about her day. I miss the young woman she became, even when she was pulling away from me. I even miss the distant, polite version of Emily, who would call occasionally to ask about the weather and my health and nothing that really mattered. I miss having someone to worry about besides myself. I miss having someone to buy Christmas presents for, someone to send birthday cards to, someone to think about when I see something funny or interesting or beautiful. I miss being someone's father. But missing her doesn't mean I can pretend that what she did was acceptable. It doesn't mean I can forget that when I needed her most, it chose to send flowers instead of herself. It doesn't mean I can go back to making excuses for behavior that was inexcusable. This is the paradox I live with now. I love Emily, and I'm done with Emily at the same time. I want her to call, and I don't want to hear from her at the same time. I hope she's happy, and I don't care about her happiness at the same time. It's exhausting, carrying all these contradictory feelings. Some days I feel like I've made peace with her absence, like I've accepted that this is simply how our story ends. Other days the grief hits me fresh and sharp, like a physical pain in my chest, and I find myself crying over the daughter I used to have, the relationship we'll never have again. I've been cleaning out closets and drawers, sorting through 40 years of accumulated life. I found a box of Emily's things in the back of her old bedroom closet, school papers and art projects and photographs from various stages of her childhood. Looking through them was like examining artifacts from a lost civilization. Here's a Father's Day card she made for me when she was 7, with a drawing of us holding hands under a rainbow. "My daddy is the best daddy in the world," she wrote in purple crayon. "He works very hard and he loves me very much." Here's a photograph from her high school graduation, the three of us standing together in our backyard. Emily, in her cap and gown between Margaret and me. We all look so happy, so normal, so much like a family that would stay together forever. Here's a letter she wrote to us from summer camp when she was 12, full of details about swimming lessons and crafts projects and new friends. "I miss you both so much," she wrote. "I can't wait to come home and tell you everything." These artifacts from our shared past feel like evidence in a case I'm trying to solve. When did this girl who missed us at summer camp become a woman who couldn't be bothered to come to her mother's funeral? What happened to the child who thought I was the best daddy in the world? I put the box back in the closet. Maybe someday I'll be ready to throw it away, or maybe someday Emily will come back and want to look through these remnants of her childhood. But for now, they stay where Margaret put them, in the back corner of a closet in a room that hasn't been occupied for over a decade. The hardest part isn't the big moments, the birthdays that pass without phone calls, the holidays spent alone, the anniversaries of Margaret's death that Emily doesn't acknowledge. The hardest part is the small moments when I want to share something with her and remember that she's not available for sharing anymore. When I see a movie I think she'd enjoy, I start to reach for my phone to text her about it, then remember. When I drive past her old elementary school, I think about picking her up after soccer practice, then remember. When I'm in the grocery store and see the cereal she used to love, I think about adding it to my cart out of habit, then remember. Memory is a cruel companion when the person you're remembering is still alive but has chosen to be dead to you. Margaret's dying wish haunts me. "Promise me you'll never give up on Emily," she said. "Promise me you'll keep loving her, even if she can't love you back right now." I made that promise to a woman I loved more than my own life, to a woman who died believing her daughter would eventually come home. But I don't know how to keep a promise that feels like it's destroying me from the inside out. How do you love someone who has shown you, repeatedly and consistently, that your love is unwanted? How do you keep hoping for someone who has demonstrated that hope is foolish? How do you leave the door open for someone who has made it clear they don't want to walk through it? I think about calling Emily sometimes, especially late at night, when the silence gets too heavy and I start to convince myself that maybe she's waiting for me to make the first move. Maybe she wants to reconcile but doesn't know how. Maybe she's as stubborn as I am, as hurt as I am, as lost as I am. But then I remember the flowers. I remember that card. "I'm sorry I can't be there." I remember the conversation 3 days after the funeral, the excuses and the tears and the promises to do better that were never followed by actual effort to do better. And I don't call. Maybe that makes me as stubborn as she is. Maybe I'm perpetuating this silence as much as she is. Maybe if I swallowed my pride and reached out, we could find some way back to each other. But I've reached out so many times over the years, and she's pulled away so many times. I've made myself vulnerable to her rejection repeatedly, and she's rejected me repeatedly. I don't have another rejection in me. I don't have another disappointment in me. I'm too old, too tired, too wounded to keep chasing after someone who doesn't want to be caught. So I carry her absence like I carry Margaret's death, as a permanent part of who I am now. The father whose daughter chose distance over closeness, silence over conversation, flowers over forgiveness. But I also carry something else, the knowledge that I tried. I wasn't a perfect father, but I was a loving father. I made mistakes, but I also made sacrifices. I failed Emily in some ways, but I never abandoned her. I never chose absence over presence when it mattered most. That matters. That has to matter, not because it excuses my failures, but because it proves that love was there, even when it was imperfect, even when it wasn't enough. If Emily ever decides she wants to come home, really come home, not just send flowers or make phone calls full of excuses, I'll be here. The door will be unlocked, the chair will be available, the love will still be waiting, battered and bruised, but still breathing. But I won't beg anymore. I won't chase anymore. I won't make myself smaller in hopes that she'll find me more acceptable. I am who I am. A man who loved his wife and his daughter the best way he knew how, who made mistakes but never stopped trying, who lost them both but refuses to lose himself in the process. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Sometimes dignity matters more than reconciliation. I loved Emily when she was small and sweet, and thought I was perfect. I loved her when she was a teenager and rolled her eyes at everything I said. I loved her when she was a young adult pulling away from our family. I loved her when she became a stranger who sent polite but distant communications. And I love her now, in her absence, in her silence, in her choice to live as if I don't exist. But I love myself too. And that means I can't keep waiting by the phone for calls that won't come. I can't keep hoping for visits that won't happen. I can't keep breaking my own heart over someone who has made it clear that I'm not important enough to include in her life. Margaret wanted me to promise I'd never give up on Emily. I think what she really wanted was for me to promise I'd keep the door open, keep the love alive, keep believing that our daughter might someday remember that she has a father who would welcome her home. I can keep that promise. I can keep the door unlocked and the love alive and the hope carefully guarded in a corner of my heart. But I can also keep living. I can also find meaning and purpose and even joy in whatever years I have left. I can honor Margaret's memory by living with grace rather than bitterness. I can honor our family's best moments by not letting the worst moments destroy me. This is how I carry Emily's absence now, like a scar that will always be tender, but doesn't have to be an open wound, like a sadness that will always be part of me but doesn't have to be the only part of me, like a love that was real and good and valuable, even though it wasn't enough to keep us together. She is my daughter. She will always be my daughter. Nothing can change that, not distance or silence or flowers sent instead of presents. But I am more than just her father. I am a man with a life to live, memories to cherish, years ahead of me that could still hold meaning and connection and love, even if they don't hold her. Margaret is gone, but she lived. Emily is absent, but she lived here once, was loved here once, was part of something beautiful here once, and I am still here, still breathing, still capable of carrying all of it, the love, the loss, the hope, the heartbreak, without letting any of it destroy me. That's what it means to carry her absence, not to pretend it doesn't hurt, but to hurt with dignity. Not to stop loving, but to love without desperation. Not to close the door, but to stop standing in the doorway, waiting for someone who may never walk through it. I am Emily's father. I will always be Emily's father, and that is both the source of my deepest pain and the foundation of whatever peace I might still find in this life. The empty chair remains empty, but I am no longer defined by what isn't there. I am defined by what was there, what is still there in memory and hope, and the stubborn persistence of love that continues long after it stops being reciprocated. That's enough. It has to be enough.